Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode of Manova International. My name is Tom Oliver Regenauer and we are recording this on the 26th of June 2025. So whatever happens afterwards until you see this video, we are not aware of it. Joining me today for the hopefully vital conversation is one of my favorite authors and journalists, who some of you might know from my tour last year, because I did use your corporate governance picture to explain what corporate governance is about, or global governance, sorry. With that being said, let's bring him on. Welcome, Iain Davis.
Oh, thanks very much for having me, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for taking the time. And instead of me introducing you, I hope a lot of people over here in the German-speaking realms of Europe, Germany, Switzerland and Austria, know your name and work, but and your books and articles. But instead of me introducing you, maybe you can quickly tell people a bit about your background, where you're coming from, how you ended up where you are today, and what you're currently working on. So.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm Iain Davis. I'm a journalist and author from the UK. I've been doing this professionally now for about, I don't know, I'm going to get this wrong, probably 10 years or more. My background was in health and social care. I predominantly worked in I've worked in both the public and the private sector, predominantly with provided services to people with drug and alcohol issues and people with there's a thing called dual diagnosis, where people have also got overlapping mental health concerns. So services tailored to meet that client group. And then I was made redundant, and then I decided to retrain as a journalist. As I said, probably I think about 10 years ago now. And since then, I'm the author of 3 books. I'm predominantly at my blog, which is iandavis.com, and I'm also very fortunate that a lot of my work is syndicated by other outlets such as Whitney Webb's Unlimited Hangout, The Off Guardian, Geopolitics and Empire, Technocracy, News and Trends, and so forth. So I'm very fortunate that my work is distributed by those outlets as well.
Truly independent journalism.
Yes, yeah, and certainly I wouldn't be able to write about the topics that I write about if I was working in the mainstream media.
True. And one of the pieces of work that I wanted to talk about, because I've recently written about the Dark Enlightenment as well, and about Peter Thiel, I wrote in, I think it was September 2024, and then some other articles on Trump and Musk and Palantir and PayPal Mafia. So I think that my readers kind of know the background a bit. But I think people are still struggling to understand what the concept of Gov-Corp really is, or the network state that Balaji Srinivasan talks about in his book and on his website. And you had a very well-sourced, lengthy piece on the Gov-Corp Technate that you published. So I think it would be good from your perspective to quickly explain what's your take on what is the Gov-Corp envisioning to be in as a future state, and how can you relate the US and even El Salvador with Bukele making a lot of moves in that direction, maybe even being a pilot project kind of or role model project for something like that Gov-Corp Dark Enlightenment network state. So what's your perspective on the current developments regarding that Gov-Corp model and the network state, and what the US government is really doing, or the PayPal Mafia is really doing in the government there?
Yeah, sure. I think the easiest way to describe the proposed notion of a Gov-Corp Technate, which is Gov-Corp, is a term that was presented by a UK philosopher, a guy called Nick Land, who was the original author of The Dark Enlightenment, which he published in 2012. But his work is very much in keeping with a group called the Neo-Reactionary Movement, who sometimes call themselves the NRX. And Balaji Srinivasan is a quite prominent member of the NRX, for example, as is Peter Thiel, although he probably wouldn't say that openly, but he obviously is, because he fully backs a guy called Curtis Yarvin in the US, who is kind of the American counterpart to Nick Land. Yarvin Yarvin wrote as a character called Mencius Moldbug, whose work and kind of rambling philosophical kind of treatise that he put out very much influenced Nick Land when he wrote The Dark Enlightenment. So the idea is that you have what they call sovereign corporations ruling a territory, which they call a realm, or it might not necessarily be a physical territory. It might be a sector of industry or something like that, but they would call it a realm. You'd have a sovereign corporation, which would be led by a CEO king, and it would be governance without government. So this is private governance of a realm. Yarvin spoke about creating what he called a patchwork of realms, and Nick Land spoke about what he called Gov-Corp. So although it wasn't entirely clear in their thinking, they haven't been specific about this, about how Gov-Corp would relate to the Sovcorp idea. I think it's fairly easy to see that the notion is that the patchwork of realms, so the patchwork of Sovcorp realms, these independent private fiefdoms, would be linked together by Gov-Corp. Gov-Corp, the idea of Gov-Corp seems to be that it's some sort of overarching structure, which would be like the ultimate corporation. So that what they are envisaging and what they're arguing for is private governance, corporate governance. That's the bottom line. They would say instead of government, public sector government. The reason that they argue this is that they say that, and very much Peter Thiel is very much agrees with this point, is that democracy inhibits technological innovation and economic innovation and industrial innovation, and so therefore you need to get rid of it and have a CEO king. So their model is I would say it's neo-feudal. The idea is that you would have this CEO monarch, this CEO king, and you'd have this top-down hierarchical structure which would liberate innovation. So this would be the realms that they envisage are regulation-free, anything goes. I think that there's an organization in the US called the Freedom City Coalition who describe what they call cities without limits. So it's a free-for-all, regulation-free, digital currency and digital ID based private form of governance of a realm where tech entrepreneurs and tech billionaires can do whatever they like. They would say, the argument goes, Donald Trump has presented the idea of what he calls freedom cities, which is the same idea. Donald Trump would say that, and Peter Thiel would say, and people like Mark Andreessen, who's another member of the NRX, would say that this would onshore jobs, would speed up technological development, would be an economic boost. You know, these are the arguments that are made for Gov-Corp technates, but the system that they propose is a highly controlled, centralized digital control mechanism that would be imposed upon. And they talk about residential zones. So residential zones obviously infers that we would be living in some of these Gov-Corp technates, which means we would be ruled by a private corporate monarch.
And I mean, with even Curtis Jarvin now being interviewed by New York Times and having some kind of prominent role or place even in Washington, and it's kind of talked about in mainstream media even, also Peter Thiel since a long time saying democracy basically has failed. Yeah, we need to replace that with something new, and openly idolizing that Freedom City model, having that Prospera city in Honduras that they're running. But and it sounds attractive in some way or form, because a lot of things that are state-run should actually be more privatized and more in the hands of the people. So it's kind of an attractive model if you listen to it. I did listen to Jarvin and others talk about their philosophy, and the as-is analysis is something that I widely share. So
Yeah.
just once they talk about solutions, it gets difficult. So how realistic do you see that prospect of we are actually installing models like Prospera across the United States? Because do you think there is a one-time disruption where things could like expedite in that way, or do you think that's a generations-long effort of massaging this into society, or what do you think is the path forward there, and how people, because I think people are waking up to at least some extent about Thiel and dark enlightenment and Palantir and what they are doing, and surveillance. Now even RFK talking about you should have wearables in the US. I think in, what did he say, 2 or 3 years everybody should have wearables for health and stuff like that. So how realistic are you, or what's the model to basically implement that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I would agree with you that the appeal is to libertarians is to say that, you know, this is freedom from government regulation, it's freedom from the rule of government, and it's been pitched very much as a libertarian kind of appeal to, and that appeals, of course, to also quite a wide section of Republican voters who are more libertarian minded. You know, and certainly believe in smaller government, so it appeals to them as well. But there is, and I can't stress this enough, there is absolutely nothing libertarian about the way that they envisage implementing this system. So I think it's important to talk about the concept of the network state, which was a book that was written by Balaji Srinivasan, I think published in 2021 or 22, I can't remember.
Pretty recent there.
Yeah. So the idea is that you would have this online communities would come together and they would collectively crowdfund the creation of a new nation state. They talk about this, how to build a new country. But initially, so that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be a geographically contiguous place. It could be just a sprawling online community that then, you know, crowdfunds the purchase, possibly the purchase of land or the development of infrastructure or whatever they want to do. So they could have a physical manifestation, but that ultimately they would come together until they reach a point where they are able to apply for formal recognition as a nation state. So there are aspects of that actually are quite interesting from a libertarian perspective. There are definitely aspects of that are interesting. But key to the NRX, the neo-reactionary movements concept of this idea, is Srinivasan also talks about how decentralization, which is something that a lot of libertarians understand and a lot of libertarians would go for, can lead to what he calls re-centralization. He argues that if we look at it from a decentralized, so if we take, for example, distributed ledger technology, the libertarian concept of a blockchain, for example, is that the permission is a permissionless system. So it enables anonymous, egalitarian freedom of access to the on-chain data that we might choose to share with each other. That is not what the neo-reactionaries want. It is not what they want. What they want is permissionless, tightly controlled, distributed ledger technology, tending towards something what the Bank for International Settlements has called a unified ledger, where all digital transactions tied to digital ID are tightly controlled by permissioned access onto the network. So that gives, and they talk about, for example, they talk about purchasing sovereignty. So you can have sovereignty if you buy it. which is fine if you've got sufficient wealth to buy some sovereignty. But if you haven't, in their model, that's just too bad. Then you are, and this is something that Nick Land spoke about, your sovereignty will be treated with derision. So this is a very hierarchical, top-down, mechanistic digital control system. That's what they are trying to build. The sales pitch is that it's some sort of decentralized, kind of technologically advanced freedom city. But once you are familiar with the underpinning philosophy of people like Peter Thiel and Nick Land and Curtis Yarvin, it's closer to fascism than it is to libertarianism, much closer.
Indeed, yeah.
And also, you know, one thing I would say about, I mean, I've spoken quite a lot about the philosophy, the so-called dark enlightenment, and you know, Peter Thiel has even kind of considered about a new form of Christianity based on some of his wacky ideas. It is, I can't stress as well, having looked at it quite a lot, it is junk. It is philosophical bilge is what it really is. And I think I don't know what you think. I kind of teeter between thinking that people like Yarvin and Land have been supported by people like Thiel because he genuinely, and Anderson and people like that, because they genuinely believe this, or it's just so convenient for what they want that they're supporting these off the wall, unhinged, quasi libertarian ramblings, which is essentially what the Dark Enlightenment and Yarvin's notion of the patchwork of realms is. It is, you know, I mean, one thing we might, Nick Land, for example, talks about something what he calls hyper racism. And it's basically eugenics. It's basically if you think of all the worst kinds of Mickey Mouse nonsense propaganda, such as, you know, the concept of eugenics, such as the idea that, you know, they're not presenting anything new. They're just repackaging stupid ideas like Plato's Guardians of the Republic. They're just repackaging the same stuff. And it always boils down to the same thing. A small group of people should rule everybody else, right? And they're just repackaging the same stuff and trying to sell it for a technological age. That's all it seems to me to be.
Yeah. And how much, I mean, even apart from the philosophical ideas of it or ramblings, if you look at the practical part, there's that one guy, I forgot the real name, Berwick, the dollar vigilante or so, that was in favor of this Prospera project and wanted to travel there and actually showcase it a little bit. And he made appointments with the local administration. Yeah, he's gonna come over. Then he actually flew out to Honduras, was there, and like a day before or so, he got an email that he is not supposed to visit the city and he's banned for life, because obviously somebody from the press room in Prospera looked at his account and found out that he's not really a fan of Thiel and Musk and the Gaza genocide and stuff and Palantir, and so. That's about it with the freedom in practical realm. So he was not even allowed to go there, even though he wanted to advertise for the place in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good thing is Pronomos Capital, which is backing Prospera in Honduras. I mean, it's one of many investors in these things like Prospera. The new Honduran government, they didn't want. These things are called ZEDs in Honduras, Zones of Economic Development, and it's Spanish, but it comes out as ZED, Z-E-D-E. But they're the same as what the UN calls SEZs, Special Economic Zones, of which there are thousands, and they are proliferating around the world. So the idea is that there's this low regulation, low tariff, tax-free actually, regulation-free economic development zones, which is Prospera is one. I think there are 3 in Honduras. So that was a deal that was agreed by the previous Honduran government. The new Honduran government doesn't like it, so the new Honduran government has stopped to shut down the ZEED developments in Honduras. These people, the people like Thiel and Anderson and and Coinbase as well, they back Pronomos Capital. Then applied to use the World Bank's what do they call it? Dispute resolution mechanism, and threatened the Honduran government with an $11 billion lawsuit. So this is the World Bank and these guys, and they are mainly guys, coming together to basically threaten the Honduran government with bankruptcy, because $11 billion would finish off the Honduran economy.
Bankrupt the country.
Bankrupt the country, and all the chaos and harm and immense harm that would cause the people of Honduras, because they weren't getting what they wanted. So these are the people that are behind these kind of initiatives. They are not humanitarians. They are full on autocratic wannabe dictators.
That's how Jarvin said Americans should overcome their dictator phobia, or whatever he wrote. It's like that line was in one of his, I think that was the New York Times even, in that interview where he said that or something, or they cited it from a piece he wrote or so.
Yeah, so I mean, you think that you look at that New York Times interview, they focused on the racist aspects of his ideas, and certainly there are elements of it. Again, they have reframed racism in their own terms, and there is some aspects of what they're talking about in terms of how pointless identity politics is, but equally how pointless identitarianism is. So that there is some some interesting points that they raise, but nonetheless, it's not that they are racist per se, it's that they're anti-human race. They think that we have to meld with technology. Nick Land calls us that our future is that we'll be technoplastic beings, so that we can be programmed to cope with the thing that they say is the existential threat. For them, it's the singularity, the point at which technology becomes self-perpetuating. They say that will basically we have to be prepared for that, and the only way that we can be prepared for that, meaning all of us, the minions, the people whose sovereignty will be treated with derision, is by being programmed robots.
Yep.
I mean that's about the full extent of their philosophy in terms of its value to humanity, as in they want to end it.
And maybe going back to that point, or that question that I said, or that I asked about, how can you actually implement such a model? If you look at Honduras and the way the World Bank and this Prospera group of investors is treating the country, that's kind of a practical way of regime change. They regime changed it before, then they got the new government in place, which is not in favor of the whole project, so now they're suing it and maybe risking, bankrupting the country. So that seems to be a more up-to-date way of regime change under the guise of being libertarian, having a Freedom City project, and just implementing Bitcoin as the national currency, and having, I think they have a 10% or so flat rate on taxes there. So that's maybe one practical way. And in my opinion, it's not even neo-feudalism. I think, I mean, you are from the UK. I think it's the same British Empire and feudalism that we had before. I just think they have more up-to-date tool sets now to control the crowd and to manipulate the crowd. I mean, it's the same propaganda stuff that Bernays wrote about that they did for World War I with the rape of Belgium and all that other stuff. So they're doing the same stuff. It's just more frequent. The news is, and it's not even about the content of the news, it's the frequency. People are not able to prioritize, digest, and filter out what's really important, so they're overwhelmed. That's for me the main aspect that I see in my surroundings and with people that I interact with online in reaction to my articles, is people are just overwhelmed. They don't know what to prioritize, what the actual content is. That's why I'm trying to speak to journalists who actually do journalism instead of doing the Tucker Carlsons and Alex Joneses of the world who are commenting and cheering on stuff that they opposed like 10 years ago. So
yeah, and I think in trying to understand it, I quite like the analogy used by Dr. David Hughes in the UK, who talks about what he calls the Omniwar. Yeah. So if you think about all the division, and so you can see this. So if you're looking at the media, the mainstream media, the legacy media, call it what you want, and think in terms of what is the division it's trying to sell. Who is the opposing group that I am supposed to oppose when I read this, whatever it is? Is it a group of? Is it a nation? Is it Russia? Is it Iran? Is it an ethnicity? Is it immigrants? Is it who am I being supposed to hate when I read this? If you ask yourself that question, as he quite rightly points out, all those divisions are what he calls horizontal. You know, it's male versus female, black versus white, East versus West, US versus Russia, Europe versus the US. You know, they're all horizontal divisions.
Christian versus Muslims.
Christian versus Muslim, clash of civilizations, all that kind of thing. What he argues very much is says we need to look at the vertical division. And the vertical division is us, as in humanity, versus them, the oligarchy, or you could say the public versus the establishment. These are the vertical control mechanisms that control us. So unless you know the information that you are consuming at least acknowledges that, it's safe to discard it. So, and I very much agree with that, because I think the problem that the problem of people becoming overwhelmed with all this stuff is that it's all propaganda. I think it's fair to say that the legacy media now in the West, certainly, but not just in the West, but you know, the West is the place where I live that I can talk about. It is a single cohesive propaganda operation. And what is really happening is this vertical division between people like, because you could talk about people like Peter Thiel and Anderson and Elon Musk and people like that. They're a new kind of oligarch that's coming to the fore, and it's very much come to the fore in the US because, you know, I think it's safe to say that the Trump administration is dominated by this group of oligarchs. That you know, that's the division that we need to be looking at. What do they want? Because it is remarkable when you look at American and Trump administration policies, how perfectly it fits with everything they want. For example, Trump's executive order, where he spoke about I can't remember which one it was, but when he spoke about eliminating information silos. What does that mean? Eliminating information silos means that the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, the Inland Revenue, all of these departments, all of their data is going to be brought together in one Palantir controlled database that will basically hoover up the data of every single United States citizen, which Palantir, who are a CIA public-private partner that run the total. People might be aware, have heard of the Total Information Awareness Project that began in the 2002, I think. That Palantir ran on behalf when it was exposed. They took most of it dark, and I mean, for the first 8 years of Palantir's existence, which I think it was formed in 2001 ish, its sole client was the CIA. That was its sole client. So I mean, they are now under the Trump administration, because the Trump administration say they want to get rid of quote unquote information silos, are developing a full-blown US technocracy. They're rolling one out in America. So going back to the point you said, well, how are they going to install these systems? They are installing them. And in America, the pitch is to the Republican voters that it's all to protect them against the infiltration of, for example, Chinese technology companies, or to protect them, or to keep them safe from immigration, better border controls, or for whatever reason to help them in their existential struggle against the Middle East, which is obviously that doesn't present any threat to Americans whatsoever. This
before the Nobel Peace Prize is given to Trump.
Before the Nobel Peace Prize, yeah. So it's all sales pitch, depending on the demographic. So you've got the Republican voters in the US have got their reasons for accepting all this tyranny, which is sold to them in terms that appeal to them. Previously, you had Democrat, and you could sort of broadly argue the kind of more left-leaning perspective is that we need the same sustainable development goal, which is the same thing. We need the same tyranny, but this time to save the planet. So it's just sales pitches, because that is the horizontal divisions that we are given. Left versus right, in this case in the US, if we're looking at Democrat versus Republican, whatever, the horizontal division, where the truth is that the solutions to both that are given to both demographics are the same. You get this highly controlled digital technology, biometric digital surveillance grid. Whether it doesn't matter which side you vote for, or which cause you believe in, that is the net result. And that is happening. It's not saying how is that happening. It is already happening. So, for example, in the UK, our government is working with BlackRock to develop 12 what they call free ports. So in the US, Trump calls them freedom cities. In the UK, they call them free ports. So these are the same idea, these special economic zones of deregulated, low tax, well, as far as I can see, no tax, deregulated, economic do whatever you like zones. In this case, the British government is working with BlackRock to bring that around. Right, so these places, I mean, going back to the division things, the same is true in Russia. So Russia have got Iran have got special economic zones. Russia's got a freedom city already built called Sirius. So it's not like this is happening just in the West. It's happening. I mean, the biggest, probably the most successful to date freedom zones are in China. You've got Shanghai and the business districts. These are special economic zones. So the idea is not, again, it goes back to what we're talking about, the idea is not necessarily that new, but it is proliferating, and certainly the neo-reactionary aligned new breed of techno-kings, they actually call themselves techno-kings, people like Thiel, Musk, Anderson, so forth, they are capitalizing on this because it fits so perfectly with what they want.
Just a coincidence, obviously, that the new German chancellor was the CEO of BlackRock Germany at some point in time, and they all get along very well. But before we go to the UK, which I wanted to talk about really, because it's besides Germany one of the countries with the most tyrannical like online hate speech laws and stuff. It seems so. It's crazy what's going on there. People even worse than in Germany, I think. Even though they caught up yesterday, I think when they did 170 raids across the country against right-wing hate speech, but. Having that horizontal conflict, that I fully agree, is the main problem, because people are not looking up in quote unquote, as they did, for example, during Occupy Wall Street, where I think there wasn't necessarily a horizontal conflict, but really a sense of understanding where the actual problem is. That predator class sits, and that we need to go against central banks and banking cartels. What do you think is the reason that Palantir is that wide out in the open right now? It's being talked about, it's present, people talk about, and there's a lot of articles, even mainstream stuff, about the immigration OS and the database and the big data pooling they are doing. What do you think is the reason that this is now very, very present? Even, what was it, I think the Forbes magazine wrote that even beginning of the year, so that the PayPal mafia took over the US government. So it's not even in secrecy. They openly admitted Palantir is out in the open, as is BlackRock. What do you think is the reason that this is happening?
It's, I mean, you'd have to speculate slightly, but personally, I think it's because they're emboldened by what's happened in the US. So that Musk stood on the platform in Butler, didn't he, where Trump was someone tried to allegedly shoot him a couple of months earlier, and said that I'm dark Maga, and everybody goes, well, what's that mean? Well, some people said, well, what does that mean? And he was clearly talking about the fact that in my view, that they're quite happy now to discuss their plans for these, because of the way that they're casting the sales pitch. The sales pitch is that these are liberating freedom cities. These are liberating, they're liberating innovation, liberating inward investment, bringing jobs and prosperity to, these economies. So I think they've got a winning ticket and a winning formula that they can now openly pitch. Because at some point, if you're going to introduce these kind of tyrannical systems, you do actually have to put them out there. You have to come out and say, right, this is what we want. I mean, obviously they're not going to say what we want to do is control everybody's lives. There is going to be a Bernays-esque sales pitch that's going to go along with it, and I think they found it. I think they think certainly for Republican voters, small c conservatives, I think they found a winning formula that they can openly pitch. I mean, the UK government, for example, we're talking about these special economic zones. They quite happily say that yes, that's what we want. I mean, they're quite happily openly talk about their partnership with BlackRock to create these special economic zones. The EU have got plenty of special economic zones and free ports that they want to construct. So it's because they're engines of prosperity. This is the argument. They're engines of prosperity. So I think that they're quite happy to talk about that now. And along with that, at some point, so say if you take Palantir for an example, let's be clear about what they propose. They propose corporate governance instead of government. So at some point, you have to make a corporation like Palantir acceptable to the public. So if they can show that, if Palantir's new harmonized US database is initially shown to be beneficial, I mean, the idea of the Doge, that it's going to be more efficient, and US taxpayers see some return on that new system, which undoubtedly they will be given to start with. then you're starting to actually move to this point where people are going to make the argument, which, you know, people like Brzezinski were making in the 1970s, that actually corporations are better at managing huge swathes of the planet than governments, because that's at some point they've got to make that sales pitch, because that's openly. Not that it hasn't been made already by, for example, people like Brzezinski, but at some point they've got to sell that to the public. At some point they've got to say, actually, corporations are better at this kind of stuff than governments. Here's the proof. And I suspect, and this is speculation, I suspect that might have a big part of why suddenly they're just coming out and saying, yeah, we want to have a total information awareness database, but it'll be good for you. It'll be good for the country.
I mean, it would fit the overall development, and that since decades we are seeing the trust in mainstream media, the trust in voting, in governments, in democracy declining constantly. There was a small uptick now with Trump. Hey, he won. Democracy works, actually. Fantastic. And that's how I think Joe Rogan opened the first of his podcasts after that election or so. Democracy actually works if it's our guy that gets in power. So, but it would nicely fit the development that you have to get rid of the nation state in some way or form, replace it with some Gov-Corp, Technate kind of model. And also because of all the wars that are ongoing all over the place, because we are dropping more democracy in some places like Iran and elsewhere, we have to give the UN more power and centralize slowly, but at some point centralize that peacemaking authority of the UN. That's why I think everybody talks about the WHO, but not the UN itself, which still has kind of a positive image to a lot of people. I mean, the WHO and the World Bank and World Trade Organization, there's maybe some doubt around it and some discussion, but the UN itself has this colorful, nice human rights kind of thing. And if you read the Human Rights Declaration 29.2 or so, where it says that you can't make any use of these rights if it's against the goals and targets of the United Nations. People don't just read Article 29 and 30, which they should. But let me switch to the UK quickly. I mean, the EU is obviously, and there was the Brexit, so it's not officially part of the EU anymore, but kind of, at least. But the EU is protecting democracy wherever it can with the Digital Services Act and the Democracy Shield and Pfizer deals on short message with von der Leyen. So it's really ridiculous. But the UK seems to be spearheading, along with Germany, that whole like hate speech narrative thing and police showing up to people's houses where they just had a social media post. So what is the actual situation over there, and is there any resistance from the people? Is it even possible to still resist, or are they actually now stopping to articulate themselves online? Are they going more into the real world and doing protests? Because the development, as in Germany, is horrific.
Well, we have currently got a government in the UK that received 17.5% of the vote in the UK. So nearly 83% of the UK population either chose not to elect this particular government or didn't bother. The vast majority, actually, the biggest single group, nearly half the population, didn't bother to elect any government at all.
Democracy works.
Democracy works, you see, which obviously gives the Labour Party under Keir Starmer, who is the most. I mean, I'm fairly certain, and I've written an article about this on my Substack, that he is a current serving member of the Trilateral Commission, which is a globalist think tank that wants a multipolar world order. It wants three regional, a balance of power global order system, which is not the official viewpoint of the British government or the British state. and they want this digital revolution. They call stakeholder capitalism, they call it capitalism 5.0. And I think that very much, going back to what we were saying, this idea of the stakeholder capitalism, so the idea of the corporation being a responsible stakeholder for society, that is just a consistent trajectory for the last 15-20 years. That's where all governments are taking us. But in the UK, so we haven't got a popular their prime minister or government. I mean, it wasn't even popular when it was first elected, you know. So I mean, it wasn't even a popular government to start with, but it's got worse since then. And I think people are disinterested, and as a consequence, marginalised and disenfranchised, and I think it's very difficult to know. I mean, personally, protesting in the streets, which there isn't much of, to be honest. Most protesting in the streets in the UK is either for government policy, such as you know, we have these stop oil protesters that are protesting for net zero policy. They're protesting for government policy, not against it, which is some bizarre,
like a parade.
It's some sort of bizarre kind of notion of dissent. But of course, these groups are highly controlled. They're, you know, controlled opposition, and you know, there are, when we have had in the recent past quite big demonstrations against the government, as you know, when there were millions of people that marched through London's during lockdown, for example, against lockdown and against government policy. The media just didn't bother reporting it. They said a few thousand people marched through London, and then they orchestrated a punch up in a park and reported that instead. So the environment, the information environment that we're living in is so corrupt, is so manipulated, that for most people, I think, who are consuming, I mean, and I see it in my own family, in my own life, the kind of brain death of sitting in front of the BBC or reading The Guardian and thinking that is telling you what's going on in the world. It's crucifyingly painful to watch people flounder about in this and think that they've got a grasp of what is happening, and they're just so far removed from reality by this overwhelming sense of overwhelming propaganda, as you were talking about earlier, that it's difficult to know how anyone could, you know, come to grips with what is actually happening. But if you do spend some time, and that's another thing, you need to spend quite a lot of time and invest yourself in finding out what is going on, which most people just don't have the time to do. Most people in the UK, most working families, both parents are working by necessity, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to afford to keep a roof over their children's heads. You know, this is the way the system is geared to work. People don't have the time to figure out the stuff that you and I are concerned with. So that's
Which is,
sorry, yeah, go on.
Which is one of the reasons, I think, why AI is so attractive to a lot of people, because now on all these search engines, be it Brave or Google or whatever, you have an AI assistant where you type in your question. It's like Alexa or so, like the Amazon Spy at home, that you ask something and then you get that one answer that Google always said, like Eric Schmidt, that's the one answer that you get, which is the truth in your language and the way you need it. I think that's kind of the attractive piece around AI also, because it makes things easier for people. So they just type in a question, and even a lot of the critical folks that are reading my articles are like, if I post them to Twitter or X, then there's constantly this Grok. What do you think about that 10-page, 12-page article? So I blocked Grok and I wrote a lengthy article about media and AI and consumption at the beginning of the year that I called iDrone, because Ars Technica did report about US Air Force and other studies where the headline was how to steer people via social media like drone swarms. And I think that was one of the most fascinating headlines and articles that I read about the Boyd model that was initially developed for moving avatars in the background of computer games and animated films. And now it has 3 rules that actually, if you read those 3 rules, then it's pretty much that what society is doing. So that Boyd model was highly interesting. So I think if we just take the last few minutes, because we have to wrap up at some point, I know you're busy. AI, on one hand, obviously a lot of people look at that, it saves me time. I can read that 12-page Regenauer article now in 5 minutes because I ask Grok for a summary and I don't check the sources. So that is obviously a sales pitch for making things more attractive to them. But in the end, I think we are losing the ability to read, think, argue, and I'm not going to use any AI in any way or form. I'm trying to block it out of my life as far as possible. But what do you think if we talk solutions, and the way that people that have invested the time or have read articles from you and Whitney and James and Ryan and who else is doing actual journalism, what can people do about this, specifically this AI topic? Because they obviously will at some point be kind of kept out of circles within society or business, also having the feeling that they're not caught up with time and developments, missing kind of the technological developments and stuff. So what's your take on, path forward? How do you personally deal with AI in research? Are you using it? And what's your take on that whole development, and especially like how to tackle the problems that go along with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the problems that one of the things that certainly an allegation that I've been something I've been accused of is that if you question things like AI or the development of digital currency and so forth, you're accused of being some sort of Luddite. That you don't that you reject technology and everything that goes with it. That's not the case. Personally, I think, for example, if you look at permissionless blockchain technology, permissionless distributed ledger technology, there are viable uses for it. And I would say the same for AI. If you've got a large, very difficult bureaucracy to manage, like for example in the UK we've got the NHS, could AI be useful in helping to analyze that, all the data that's being gathered from that, and make better decisions? Yeah, sure, AI could do that. It could be very useful for that. But the problem that we've got is, because development is controlled by the oligarchy, because they're the investors that fund it, when some technological development like AI comes along, the beneficial uses for it are not what they have in mind. That's not what they have in mind. What they have in mind is using it as a weapon. So we see things like the creation of a total information awareness database in the US. We see companies like Palantir and Angeril and companies like that using AI to perfect better targeting systems, which they then, having done a reasonably good job of improving AI targeting in Ukraine, they then go and partner with the Israeli government so that they can do better surgical strikes and commit a genocide in Gaza. I mean, that's what they have in mind for the use of AI. So that's the problem, and therefore, how should we respond to that? Well, I mean, the one thing I would say is, whether it's Grok, whether it's you, whether it's Tom, or whether it's Ian, or whether whoever is giving you information, the fact that it's AI doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference. AI is just another source of information. So the responsibility to verify and check whether that information is accurate is ours. It is us as human beings, because it's information that is given to us for a purpose. You and I are imparting information to other people right now for a reason. We want people to know about the things that we're talking about. Well, so exactly, AI is just another source of, when it's used as a large language model kind of vehicle, then that's its purpose. Its purpose is to impart information, but the responsibility for verifying the accuracy of that information is yours and yours alone. You can't devolve that responsibility to some other group or some other entity, because it's not theirs, it's yours. So, and that is unfortunate for people that are very busy and just want easy, quick fix solutions and simple convenience. Unfortunately, that is the pathway to slavery. So the choice is, you can either take responsibility for yourself and your actions, including your responsibility to verify the information that you consume, or you can simply sit back, get on with your life, do what you're told, believe whatever rubbish is given to you, and go down the path that is being laid out before us, and in your children, or certainly in the next generation or two, will be slaves. That's your choice. So it's up to you. It's not up to your government. It's not up to Palantir. It's not up to Peter Thiel. It's up to you to decide what you are willing to accept or not. And unfortunately, people want an easier solution. They want someone to tell them what to do. They want someone, well, tough, because it doesn't, what it boils down to is you taking responsibility, and you taking responsibility to know about the world around you. You have to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it a funny coincidence, or maybe it's not, but that Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and we are now at Generation Alpha after X, Y, and Z. Now we are talking about Generation Alpha. It's not that far to get to Epsilon, though.
Yeah.
So if you think about that, that's just a few letters until Epsilon. So, and that's the lowest caste of people in Huxley's Brave New World. So.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Schmidt and you know, though he's dead, Kissinger openly discussed them. They talked about us being Homo technicus.
Optimist.
Homo technicus, I think they wanted us to become.
Yeah, okay, yeah, right. Yes.
Same idea as Land's, you know, technoplastic beings, that we would be some sort of subspecies ruled by our magnificent techno king overlords. They're not joking, these people. That's something that I would stress to people as well. These people are serious. They're not joking. They really do want to implement this future. They really are going for it.
They do. Yeah, agreed. However, one thing I think that people can also learn from a conversation like this is that even if it's dark topics, we shouldn't lose humor and you know, mocking things. That's or having I always say the actual revolution is leading a happy and fulfilled life with the loved ones, and a motivated, you know, energetic approach to handling yourself, taking responsibility and creating things. I think Whitney said that very nice at some point when asked about what the solution is to this whole like dehumanizing agenda, and she just replied, create things. I mean, you have to create things. Whether it's writing, painting, music, whatever. Create a garden, building a shelf, whatever you do, create. And just don't consume.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, something that, going back to, you know, something that I've written about as well, but going back to my former professional life, an approach we use was something called acceptance and commitment therapy. So this works on the idea that you accept the things that you cannot change, and you commit to the things that are important to you. So what is really important to us? I mean, I don't know about you, Tom, and I don't know about anybody else either, but for me, it's my family, you know, having a roof over my head, having enough to eat, being warm, you know, and having an opportunity to have fun with the people that I care about, and have a good laugh, and a decent quality of life. In that sense, you know, I don't need what else do I need, right? And I can't think of what it might be. So those are the things that matter to me. So every time we think about doing something, like for example, buying something with digital currency or buying something with a card instead of using cash, if you pause at that moment and say, right, is this moving me towards something that is important to me, or is this moving me away from something that is important to me? If it's moving you away from something that's important to you, i.e. leading you down some sort of dystopian technological nightmare, don't do it. Simple as that. Don't do it. So no, sorry, I can't do that. If you won't accept cash, I'll have to go somewhere else. So that means accepting some inconvenience. You know, can I have a digital passport? If I don't have my digital passport, can I go abroad? No, I can't. Is that inconvenient? Yes. But if I have the digital passport, the biometric ID that's going to take me to another country, what does that mean for the things that are important for me and the people that I care about? So if I don't have it, okay, I'm not going towards that thing that is terrible, and yes, it is inconvenient. But you alone, you might think, well, what's the point in me doing that? Well, for you personally, you're just making a moral commitment to not do something that you don't want to do. But if millions of us do that as individuals, then they won't be able to implement biometric digital ID passports because there won't be any tourist trade. So that's how we can collectively come together as sovereign individuals and make a change. But we have to take responsibility. We have to be that sovereign individual first. Then we can come together, cooperate and make change.
That makes for a wonderful closing remark, Iain. But since we're on top of the hour, that's actually a good point to stop, I think. But tell people again where they can find your work and what you're currently working on. You just released a book. I forgot when it was, but the Manchester Attack, which is I think a very interesting read as well. I haven't read it, but I went through the.
Oh, well, take it from me. It is interesting, Tom.
Yeah, I believe that, and I'm gonna get it. But tell people where they can find your work, what you're currently working on, and how they get in touch with you if they want or need to.
Yeah, you can get in touch with me via my website. All the details are on my About Me page, I think, and it's iaindavis.com. My name's spelled with two I's. It's iaindavis.com, all one word. I write on Substack, iaindavis.substack.com. I haven't written on it for a while. The reason that I haven't written, in fact, I haven't written anything for a while, because the reason is that I'm writing another book at the moment. It's a very exciting project. I can't disclose much about it at the moment, so I'm sort of kind of like just let you know that that's what I'm doing. But I'm doing that, and hopefully that will be coming out. I hope in the next, I don't know when, but I hope it will be coming out soon. And yeah, I'm also republished, as I said, by a lot of other outlets such as Whitney Webb's Unlimited Hangout, Geopolitics and Empire, Patrick Wood's Technocracy and News and Trends, and the Off Guardian also. Yeah, so you can find me there.
We will link that below the video and make sure that people find that, as well as the article we started talking about, the Gov-Corp one, the two-piece article.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time today, and I hope we can repeat that at some point. We could have talked for hours, but we'll keep it in digestible format. So thanks for taking time, Iain, and have a good time.
Cheers, Tom. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.